My husband said it was just a guy's trip, and I discovered his secret $9.4 million account with his mistress. There are betrayals that shatter your soul in a second. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd tell. And if you, for a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Helen Miller. I'm 64 years old. And for 38 years, I thought I knew my husband. We live in a quiet neighborhood in Santa Fe, in an adobe-style house with a central courtyard where bougainvilleas I planted myself when we were young have grown wild. Those purple flowers became the silent witnesses to my life. They bloomed every spring while I grew old, waiting for Arthur to look at me the way he used to. Every morning at 6 o'clock sharp, I'd get up to make him freshly brewed coffee in the kitchen with the hand-painted Mexican tiles I inherited from my mother. The aroma of coffee and cinnamon would fill the house, mingling with the sound of the bells from St. Joseph's Church, marking the start of another identical day. Arthur would come downstairs in his perfectly pressed shirt. I laid it out for him every night. Take his coffee without looking at me, check his phone, and leave without a goodbye. "See you tonight," he'd mumble as he closed the door with that dry click that echoed through the empty house. I'd stay there, standing in the kitchen doorway, watching the coffee steam vanish just like my hopes for a conversation, a caress, for him to ask me how I slept. My wrinkled hands held the warm mug, and for a moment I'd stand motionless, listening to the echo of his footsteps fading down the mosaic hallway until the front gate shut with a final thud. For 4 decades, my routine had been the same: cleaning that 3-bedroom house where we raised David and Patricia, watering the courtyard plants, the roses that no longer bloomed like they used to, the ferns struggling under the relentless New Mexico sun, and preparing meals that Arthur ate in silence while watching the news on the living room TV. "How was your day?" I'd ask. "Fine," he'd reply without looking up. "Need anything else?" "No." And so, night after night, our conversations were reduced to monosyllables that cut the air like knives. I'd wash the dishes while he locked himself in his study to work, though I now know he spent hours on the phone with voices I didn't recognize. That Friday in March, when the desert marigolds began to bloom, painting the sidewalks yellow, Arthur walked into the kitchen with a different attitude. He wore that forced smile he used when he needed something from me, the same expression he put on when he didn't want me to ask questions. "Helen, my dear," he said, and those words sounded strange because he hadn't called me that in years. "I'm heading to Key West for the weekend with Roger and the guys from work. A guy's trip, you know. Fishing, beer, watching the game." He moved toward me as if to hug me, but only took the car keys from the wooden table. His fingers brushed against mine for a second, and I felt his skin was cold, distant. "Key West?" I asked, drying my hands on the embroidered apron that had belonged to my grandmother. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? We could have planned something together. We haven't gone out in months." His expression shifted. The smile vanished, and I saw that look I knew so well. Irritation, weariness, as if my words were an annoying obstacle in his perfect plans. "Oh, Helen, always the same. Can't you understand that I need a break? A break from all this." He made a vague gesture toward the kitchen, toward me, toward our life. "All this what, Arthur?" "This woman, the routine, the complaints, your questions. Sometimes a man just needs to breathe." Those words stabbed me in the chest like splinters. Breathe, as if I were the stale air he needed to escape from. "I was just asking because nothing, Helen. It's settled. I'm leaving tomorrow morning and coming back Sunday night. Period." I watched him go upstairs to pack his bag, heard the sound of drawers opening and closing, the slide of the closet door. From the kitchen, I could hear him moving around the room, packing things I couldn't see, preparing for a life where I didn't exist. That night, while he slept soundly as if nothing had happened, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling with its wooden beams, counting the cracks that had appeared over the years. 1, 2, 3, like the lies I was beginning to suspect. The night wind rustled the leaves of the courtyard trees, and I heard the whisper as if they were voices warning me of something my heart already knew, but my mind refused to accept. At 6 on Saturday morning, Arthur got up quietly. I watched him from the bed, pretending to be asleep as he showered, shaved carefully, and put on his favorite blue shirt, the one I had given him for our 35th anniversary. He put on cologne more than usual and tucked something into his wallet that I couldn't make out. "I'm leaving," he murmured from the doorway, but he didn't even wait for my reply. I heard the engine of his old Ford Taurus driving away down the quiet street, and I stayed there, in our queen-sized bed that suddenly felt immense and cold. The sheets smelled of his absence, of broken promises, of 38 years of a life that perhaps had never been as real as I believed. That weekend, for the first time in decades, the house was completely silent. There was no one to cook for, no one to make a mess, no one who needed my attention. I should have felt free, but instead, I felt like a ghost wandering the halls of my own life, searching for evidence that I had ever mattered to anyone. He came back on Sunday night, different. His skin was tanned, as if he'd spent hours in the sun, but something in his attitude unsettled me more than his appearance. He walked with a confidence I hadn't seen in years, whistling a tune I didn't recognize as he dropped his suitcase by the entrance. When he leaned in to give me a routine kiss on the cheek, I caught a scent that wasn't his. A sweet, floral perfume. Definitely a woman's. "How was the fishing?" I asked, noticing he brought no fish, no stories, no photos with his friends. "Good. Good. They weren't biting much, but we had a great time," he answered, avoiding my gaze and heading straight for the fridge for a beer. That night, while he was in the shower, I went through his suitcase. Among the dirty clothes, I found a napkin from a restaurant called the Ocean Pearl, with a phone number written by hand and a heart drawn next to it. It wasn't my handwriting. The shirt smelled of that same perfume I'd noticed on his cheek, and in his pants pocket, I found a hotel receipt for 2 people. My hands trembled holding that piece of paper. Double room, 2 guests, ocean view. 2 guests. It wasn't a guy's trip. Over the next few weeks, I began to remember things I had ignored for years. The weekends he went to work and came back relaxed, as if he'd been on vacation. The calls he'd cut short when I walked into the room. The business trips that were extended without explanation. The times he came home late with excuses about traffic or urgent meetings. How long had I been a fool? One afternoon, while organizing the closet, I found a shoebox hidden behind his suits. Inside were photos. Photos of him with a red-haired woman. Young, beautiful. They looked happy, holding each other on beaches I had never visited, in elegant restaurants where he had never taken me. In one picture, she wore a ring that glittered in the sun. In another, they were toasting with champagne glasses. On the back of one photo, in Arthur's handwriting, it said, "My Jenna, my true love, Key West, March 2024. March, last month. His guy's trip." I sat on the edge of the bed, holding those photographs as if they were evidence in a crime. My heart was beating so loud I could hear it in my ears. 38 years. 38 years of my life given to a man who had another life, another love, another woman who received everything that was denied to me. I remembered then all the sacrifices I had made for him, for our family. When David was born with respiratory problems, I left my job at the public library to care for him. Arthur promised it would be temporary, that when our son got better, I could go back. I never went back. When Patricia arrived 3 years later, it was just assumed that I would be the one to stay home. "Women are better at these things," Arthur would say when his friends asked why I didn't work. "Helen has a special touch with kids." While he built his career, I built my life around his. I woke up before dawn to press his shirts before he even got up. I cooked his favorite meals even if I didn't like them. I canceled creative writing courses, sewing workshops, painting classes that I was so excited about, because there was always something more urgent. David had a fever. Patricia needed help with her homework. Arthur had an important dinner with clients. When my mother died, I wanted to use my savings to get her a proper headstone at the old cemetery. Arthur convinced me that the money was better invested in his business. "Your mom is at peace now, Helen. The dead don't need luxuries. The living need opportunities." I never saw a dime from that investment. When the kids grew up and left home, I thought it would be our time. Arthur and Helen, alone again, like when we were dating. I planned a surprise romantic dinner for our 30th anniversary. I bought candles, made his favorite pot roast, and wore the blue dress he used to love. He came home late, ate in silence watching the news, and then went to his study without a word about the decorations, the candles, the effort. "Did you notice anything special?" I asked him. "Like what?" "It's our anniversary today, Arthur." "Oh, right. Happy anniversary." And he went back to his papers. That night, I cried in the shower so he wouldn't hear me. The hot water washed away my tears, but not my disappointment. I promised myself it was the last time I would cry over his indifference, but it wasn't the last time. When Patricia got divorced and moved back home with my 2 grandchildren, Arthur was annoyed. "We can't support the whole family," he protested, but I worked twice as hard to make sure they had everything they needed. I sold my quilts at the downtown craft market in the mornings and cleaned houses in the afternoons. Patricia found a job after 6 months and moved out, but Arthur never acknowledged my effort. Neither did David. When he married Amanda, he asked me to lend them money for a down payment on their house. It was my emergency fund, my life savings from selling my crafts. I gave it to them without a second thought. "We'll pay you back in a year, Mom," he promised. That was 5 years ago. They've never paid me a cent, but they have asked to borrow money 3 more times. The last time I visited them, I overheard Amanda complaining to David. "Your mom always shows up unannounced," she said, thinking I couldn't hear. "She's getting old. She should understand we have our own lives." Me, who for 30 years took care of David when he was sick, who paid for his college education by selling my gold jewelry, who slipped him cash for treats without Arthur knowing, was now a nuisance to my own son. Arthur never defended me. He never defended anyone but himself. That night, with the photographs of his betrayal scattered on the quilt my grandmother had made, I wondered when I had started to disappear. When did I stop being Helen and become simply Arthur's wife? When did my dreams, my desires, my needs become less important than everyone else's? I got up and looked at myself in the vanity mirror. My gray hair was tied back in the same old bun. My house dress was comfortable but plain. My hands, wrinkled from years of housework, held the proof that my marriage had been a lie. But my eyes still had life in them. They still had questions. And for the first time in decades, I felt I deserved answers. The following days were a silent torture. I kept the photographs in my underwear drawer, next to the love letters Arthur wrote to me when we were dating. The irony was painful. The proof of his past love lived alongside the evidence of his present betrayal. Every morning when I got dressed, I'd see that shoebox and feel a weight on my chest. Arthur continued his routine as if nothing had changed, but now I watched him differently. Every gesture, every word, every silence had a new meaning. When his phone rang and he stepped out into the courtyard to answer, I knew it wasn't work. When he came home late smelling of that sweet perfume, I knew he wasn't coming from a meeting. When he looked at me with annoyance for asking about his day, I understood it was because his day had been wonderful, with another woman. On Tuesday, while he was in the shower, I checked his phone. I had learned his passcode by watching him. 1986, the year Jenna was born. He hadn't even used our anniversary or our children's birthdays, the birth year of his mistress. The messages shattered my soul. "My love, I can't wait for Friday. I need to see you. Helen is being more difficult than ever. I think she suspects something. I've almost got everything ready for our plan. Soon we'll be together forever. I love you, Jenna. You're everything Helen could never be. Young, successful, free. Young, successful, free. Everything I had stopped being for him. I kept reading with trembling hands. There were messages going back 2 years. 2 years during which I had continued to cook for him, wash his clothes, care for him when he was sick, believing we were a couple facing the passage of time together. But the message that hurt the most was one Jenna had sent him. "My darling, I've deposited your share into the Cayman account. With that and the sale of Helen's house, we can buy the condo in Key West. Have you spoken to the notary about getting her to sign the papers? The house. My house. The house where my children were born, where I cared for my sick mother, where I had sat and knitted for thousands of nights waiting for him to come home. The house my father had left to me, that was in my name before we even got married. I ran to the study where Arthur kept the important papers. With hands that wouldn't stop shaking, I searched through the files until I found the property documents. My heart stopped when I read the lines, My signature appeared on a power of attorney authorizing Arthur to sell the house. But I had never signed that document. The handwriting looked like mine, but there were details that weren't right. The H in Helen was shaped slightly differently. The date was from 6 months ago, when I had been in bed with pneumonia, so weak I could barely hold a glass of water. Arthur had forged my signature. I sank into his leather chair, the same one where he sat every night plotting my destruction. Around me were invoices, statements, documents that I now saw with new eyes. Everything was meticulously prepared to strip me of the only thing that was truly mine. I kept looking. I found bank statements for accounts I didn't know existed. Arthur had opened several accounts in his name using our address, but without listing me as a joint owner. One had nearly $20,000. Another, over $50,000. Money he had accumulated for years without telling me. While I begged him for money to fix the leaking roof or buy a new washing machine. "There's no money for that nonsense, Helen," he would say whenever I mentioned a need for the house. "We have to be responsible. We can't spend on frivolous things." Frivolous things. A roof that didn't leak was frivolous to him, but keeping his mistress in luxury was an investment. At the bottom of the drawer, I found a folder labeled JC Key West Project. Inside were brochures for luxury oceanfront condos, quotes for expensive furniture, investment plans, all in the names of Arthur Miller and Jenna Cole. There were even pictures of the two of them visiting the properties, smiling like a happy couple planning their future together. One document was a letter from a real estate company confirming the purchase of a penthouse for $300,000. The closing date was scheduled for next month, the same month that, according to the forged papers, my house would be sold. I finally understood the scale of his plan. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was systematically robbing me. He had used my marriage as a cover while building a new life with another woman, financed with my assets. I wasn't his wife. I was his victim. That evening, when Arthur came home whistling and in a good mood, I was sitting in the living room waiting for him. I had made coffee as always, but this time my hands weren't shaking. A strange calm had settled over me, as if I had hit rock bottom and there was nowhere further to fall. "How was your day?" I asked in the same old voice. "Good, good. Lots of work." He poured himself some coffee and sank into his favorite armchair, picking up the remote. "What did you do? Hope you weren't gossiping with the neighbors again." Gossiping. That's what he called it when I tried to tell him about my day. About the small things that happened while he lived his double life. "Arthur," I said in a voice I didn't recognize as my own, "we need to talk." He looked at me for the first time in weeks, but his expression wasn't curiosity. It was annoyance. "What now? Can't you see I'm tired? Do you know someone named Jenna?" His face changed instantly. The color drained from his cheeks and he nearly dropped the coffee mug. But he recovered quickly, with the skill of a practiced liar. "Jenna? I don't know what you're talking about. Why do you ask?" "Because I found her pictures in your closet. Because I read her messages on your phone. Because I saw the papers for Key West. Because I know you're planning to sell my house." The silence that followed was deafening. Arthur stared at me as if he were truly seeing me for the first time, as if his house pet had suddenly learned to speak. His eyes hardened in a way that scared me. "You're crazy," he finally said, his voice cold in a way I'd never heard. "You're making things up. I think you need medical help, Helen. At your age, it's normal to start getting confused." "I'm not confused. I have proof." "What proof? Have you been going through my things? Spying on me?" His voice rose, but it wasn't the anger of an innocent man wrongly accused. It was the fury of a man who'd been caught. "Arthur, please, stop pretending. Just tell me the truth." He stood up abruptly, knocking his mug to the floor where it shattered on the tiles I had scrubbed that morning. Coffee spilled like a dark stain spreading toward my feet. "The truth? You want the truth?" His voice was now a roar that made me step back. "The truth is, I'm sick of it. Sick of this house. Sick of this life. Sick of you. Did you really think I was going to spend the rest of my life tied to a woman who has nothing to offer?" Every word was a stab. "Nothing to offer? Arthur, I gave you my youth, my dreams, my—" "Your what? Your constant complaining? Your look of resignation? Your way of making everything boring and predictable?" He stepped toward me until I could feel his breath. Jenna makes me feel alive. She reminds me who I really am, not the mediocre man I became by being with you. I stood there, among the broken glass and spilled coffee, as the man I had shared nearly 4 decades with told me I was the mistake of his life, that I had been the burden that kept him from being happy, that I, who had sacrificed everything for him, was the one to blame for his mediocrity. And yes, he continued cruelly, we are going to sell this house. It's the only valuable thing we have, and I deserve my share. After all the years I've spent supporting you, I think that's fair. Supporting me, as if my years of domestic labor were worth nothing, as if raising his children, managing his home, giving up my career so he could build his, wasn't real work. This house is mine, Arthur. I inherited it from my father, but we're in a community property state, dear. What's yours is mine, too. And then I understood he had planned all of this for a long time. Not just the affair, not just the theft, but my final humiliation. He would make me seem crazy, question my memory, make me doubt my own sanity while he stripped me of everything I had left. But for the first time in 38 years, Helen Miller didn't bow her head. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen, watching the first rays of sun filter through the window, while Arthur snored peacefully in our bed, as if destroying my life was as natural as breathing. At 7, when I heard him get up, I had already made a decision. I couldn't face this alone. I called David as soon as I figured he'd be awake. My eldest son had always been an early riser, like his father. Mom? What's wrong? It's 7:30 in the morning. David, I need you to come to the house. Your father and I are having serious problems. Problems? What kind? Is Dad sick? No, honey. It's something else. I'd rather explain when you're here. Can you come? I heard a sigh of frustration on the other end. Mom, you know I have an early meeting on Tuesdays. Can't it wait until the weekend? David, please. It's very important. Oh, Mom, you're not overreacting again, are you? You know you can be dramatic about little things. Dramatic about little things. My own son had already categorized my needs as exaggerations before he even knew what they were. Your father is cheating on me, and he's trying to sell the house behind my back. There was a long pause. Are you sure about that? Mom, at your age, sometimes people misinterpret things. At my age, the same phrase Arthur used to discredit everything I said. David, I have proof. Photos, messages, documents. Okay. I'll stop by this afternoon after work. But Mom, please don't make a scene until I get there. I hung up, feeling worse than before. I had to ask permission and justify my pain even to speak to my own son. I called Patricia, my younger daughter. She had always been closer to me, more understanding. Mom? What happened? I explained the situation in more detail. Patricia listened in silence, but when I finished, her response broke my heart. Mom, are you completely sure? Dad just never seemed like the type to do something like that. Patty, I have the photos right here. The messages, the documents for the house. It's just, look, Mom, I don't want to sound cruel, but you two have been together for a long time. It's normal for Dad to need, I don't know, a breath of fresh air. Maybe if you tried to dress up more, to be less like you are now. Less like I am now? Oh, Mom, you know, less complaining, less clingy. Men need their space. Maybe if you gave him more freedom, he wouldn't be looking for other things. Less complaining, less clingy. My daughter was blaming me for her father's affair before she even knew the full story. Patricia, he forged my signature to sell my house. Mom, are you sure you're not misreading the papers? You were never very good at understanding legal documents. Never very good. As if 40 years of managing the family budget, paying bills, and solving everyday problems had taught me nothing. Patty, I need you to come. Mom, I can't. I have too much work this week. Besides, I think you should calm down a bit before making such serious accusations. What if you just talk to Dad calmly? Maybe there's an explanation. She hung up without saying goodbye, leaving me with the phone in my hand and a hollow feeling in my stomach that had nothing to do with hunger. David arrived that afternoon looking annoyed, as if fulfilling a family duty was too heavy a burden for him. He sat in the living room with his arms crossed while I showed him the photographs. Look, honey, this is from March, when he told me he was going fishing with his friends. David took the photos reluctantly, glanced at them for a few seconds, and set them on the table. Mom, these could be from any time. Maybe they're old. They're dated, David. Look at the back of this one. Dates can be faked, Mom. Besides, how did you get these? Were you spying on Dad? I found them in his closet. So you were going through his things without permission. He looked at me disapprovingly as if I were the criminal. Mom, that's not right. Marriage requires trust. Trust? David, your father has been having an affair for years. Allegedly having an affair. So far, all I see are photos that could have any number of explanations and a mom who's spying on her husband. I showed him the text messages, the house documents, the bank statements. With every piece of evidence I presented, David either found a justification or downplayed its importance. The messages could be misinterpreted. Maybe it's just a friendship and you're reading things that aren't there. David, it says I love you. It talks about our plan. Mom, people say I love you all the time these days. It doesn't mean what it used to. When I showed him the papers for the house, his reaction hurt more than anything else. Mom, maybe Dad thought it was better not to worry you with these legal matters. You were never good with that stuff. Maybe he was just trying to protect you. Protect me by forging my signature? Are you sure he forged it? Maybe you signed it and don't remember. You've been a little forgetful lately. Forgetful. Again, questioning my sanity, my memory, my ability to understand my own life. David, I know what I signed and what I didn't. Look, Mom, he said, getting up from the couch impatiently. I think you're making a mountain out of a molehill. Dad has worked his whole life to give us the best. He's been a good husband, a good father. I'm not going to judge him over a few photos that could have 1,000 explanations. A good husband? A good father? David, where was your father when you were sick as a child? Who got up in the middle of the night to take care of you? Who sold her jewelry to pay for your college tuition? Oh, Mom, not this drama again. Yes, you did a lot, but Dad did too. He worked to support all of us. I worked too. I took care of this house, of you, of him. That's not real work, Mom. It's not the same as going out every day to earn a living. Not real work. My own son, whom I had raised with my own hands, was telling me my entire life had not been real work. Look, David continued, my advice is to talk to Dad like civilized adults. If there are problems in your marriage, get couples therapy. But please don't drag me into the middle of your conflicts. David, he is stealing my house. Mom, that's enough. If Dad does something with the house, it will be for the good of you both. He knows about finances. He understands investments. Trust him like you have your whole life. He walked to the door, but before leaving, he turned to me with an expression I will never forget. And Mom, a piece of advice. If you want to save your marriage, maybe you should ask yourself what you can change. Men don't look elsewhere when they're happy at home. His words hung in the air after he left, like toxic smoke from a fire. My own son had told me his father's infidelity was my fault. That night I called Amanda, my daughter-in-law, thinking that perhaps another woman would better understand my situation. Helen, look, I'd rather not get involved in problems between you two, she told me in that sweet voice she used when she wanted to avoid commitment. But if I may offer some advice, I think sometimes we wives see enemies where there are none. Men need their space, their friends. Maybe Arthur just needs to feel appreciated. Amanda, he's having a relationship with another woman. Oh, Helen, but are you absolutely sure? Mr. Miller has always seemed like such a proper man, so dedicated to his family. I have proof, Amanda. Well, you know, at a certain age, women can get more sensitive, more suspicious. It's normal, it's the hormonal changes. Maybe you should talk to a doctor. Hormonal changes. Sensitive. Suspicious. Even my daughter-in-law had a medical explanation for my pain. You know what I suggest? Get yourself dolled up, cook him his favorite meals, be more affectionate with him. Men are like children. They need to be spoiled. I hung up the phone feeling as if I had just spoken to a stranger. The woman who had entered my family, who ate at my table, who had taken my borrowed money, was giving me advice on how to be a better wife to the man who was betraying me. That night, alone in my kitchen, I understood something that chilled me to the bone. I had no allies in my own family. They had all taken Arthur's side without even knowing the full truth. They all preferred to keep the family peace, rather than defend my dignity. They all found it easier to blame me than to face the reality that the patriarch of the family was a liar and a thief. I poured myself a chamomile tea and sat there, watching the night swallow the last remnants of daylight. For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be completely alone. I had no husband, no children, no family who would believe or defend me. But something strange had begun to grow inside me. A small flame of rage, fueled by every humiliation, every dismissal, every time I had been made to feel crazy for trusting my own eyes and my own experience. If I was going to be alone in this fight, then I would have to learn to fight alone. And for the first time in 64 years, that idea didn't scare me. The next day dawned differently, not because anything in the outside world had changed, but because something inside me had awakened after decades of being dormant. I got up before Arthur, as always, but this time I didn't go to the kitchen to make him coffee. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching him sleep with that peaceful expression of someone with no remorse. His phone vibrated on the nightstand. Instinctively, I reached out to silence it, as I had done thousands of times so he wouldn't wake up. But I stopped myself. Why? Why was I still protecting him even now that I knew the truth? I let it ring until he woke up, annoyed. "Helen, why don't you turn off that damn phone?" "It's not my phone," I replied with a calm that surprised me. "It's yours. You turn it off." He looked at me, puzzled, as if I had spoken in another language. For 4 decades, I had been his personal secretary, his unpaid assistant who handled all the annoying details of daily life. He got up, grumbling, and answered the phone. From his tone, I knew immediately it was her, Jenna, his true love. "No, honey, I can't talk right now." "Yes, I've almost got everything ready. I'll call you tonight." He hung up and went to the bathroom without looking at me, but I didn't look away. I watched him as if seeing him for the first time, a 65-year-old man with a potbelly, badly dyed gray hair, and the arrogance of someone who thinks the world owes him something. What had I ever seen in him? When had I stopped loving him and simply started tolerating him out of habit? When he came out of the bathroom, dressed for work, he found me still sitting on the bed. "Aren't you going to make breakfast?" he asked in that annoyed tone he used when his routine was disrupted. "No." "What do you mean, no?" "I'm not going to make breakfast. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever again." He stood in the doorway, his tie half knotted, as if he couldn't process what he had just heard. "Helen, what's gotten into you? Are you sick?" "I'm fine. Better than ever, actually." I stood up and put on my robe. "If you're hungry, you can make your own breakfast. There are eggs in the fridge." "My own breakfast? Helen, have you gone crazy? I work. I support this house." "You work," I interrupted, "and so do I. But my job here ends today." I walked out of the bedroom, leaving him speechless. For the first time in 38 years, Arthur Miller had to make his own coffee. That morning, while he struggled with the coffee maker he had never learned to use, I sat in the courtyard soaking up the sun. I hadn't made the beds. I hadn't started the laundry. I hadn't planned the day's meal. I had simply done nothing I was supposed to do, and it felt wonderful. The April sun warmed my face as I listened to Arthur cursing in the kitchen because he couldn't find anything. For 4 decades, I had been the invisible GPS of that house, the one who knew where everything was, the one who kept everything running smoothly and quietly. Now he would have to learn to navigate his own home. "Helen, where are my white shirts?" "In your closet," I answered without moving from my chair. "I can't find them." "Then look harder. Aren't you going to get them for me?" "No." He left for work without breakfast, wearing a wrinkled shirt and a furious expression that filled me with a strange satisfaction. For the first time in decades, the consequences of his disorganization were his problem, not mine. But the real liberation came that afternoon when I decided to go to the bank. Throughout our marriage, Arthur had managed the important finances while I handled the day-to-day money. He had the savings accounts, the investments, the insurance policies. I had a checking account for groceries and household expenses. I had never questioned this arrangement because I trusted him, because I believed we were a team working toward common goals. How stupid I had been. I walked into the local Bank of America branch with my legs trembling but my mind clear. The bank teller who helped me was a young woman, maybe in her 30s, with a professional smile and endless patience. "Ma'am, how can I help you today? I'd like to open a savings account, just in my name." "Of course. Will this be an individual account or joint with your husband?" "Individual, just mine." As I filled out the forms, I felt a strange thrill. It was the first bank account I had opened in 40 years. The first financial decision I had made without consulting anyone. My signature on the contract wasn't forged, coerced, or influenced. It was mine. I deposited the $300 I had saved from selling cookies during the holidays. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every dollar had been earned with my own 2 hands, without depending on anyone. The teller handed me my new debit card. "Mrs. Miller, your account is now active. Do you need any other information?" "Yes," I said, surprising myself. "What do I need to do to change my marital status on all my documents if I get a divorce?" She explained the process with the kind efficiency of someone who has seen many lives change course at her desk. Divorce. The word I had avoided thinking about for months now sounded natural on my lips. That night, when Arthur came home expecting dinner to be ready, he found me in the living room reading a magazine. "What about dinner?" "I didn't make dinner." "Helen, what is wrong with you? You've been acting crazy all day." "I'm not crazy, Arthur. I'm awake. For the first time in 40 years, I am completely awake." He looked at me with a mix of confusion and annoyance. "Look, if you're mad about last night, we can talk. But you can't use these tantrums to get my attention." Tantrums. That's what he called my awakening. "It's not a tantrum, it's a decision. I will no longer cook for you, wash your clothes, or clean up after you. I will no longer live as your unpaid maid." "My maid? Helen, you're my wife. I was your wife. Now I'm a woman who has finally understood that she deserves respect." He approached me with that condescending expression he used when he wanted to calm my overreactions. "My love, you're upset. I know these mood swings are normal at your age, but don't touch me." He stopped short. In 4 decades, I had never told him not to touch me. "Helen, and don't call me my love." "So save that name for Jenna, remember? I'm just the old woman who gets in your way." For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear that his controlled world was crumbling. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do. And you also know that you can't treat me like an idiot anymore." We slept in the same bed that night, but without touching, without speaking, like 2 strangers sharing a space. But I slept better than I had in years. For the first time in decades, I didn't lie awake wondering what I had done wrong, why my husband seemed so unhappy with me, how I could be a better wife. Instead, I fell asleep planning my new life, a life where no one would call me crazy for trusting my own eyes, a life where my feelings would be valid without needing anyone's approval, a life where Helen Miller would exist in her own right, not as an appendage to someone else. The next day, Arthur got up early, clearly expecting me to have come to my senses during the night and reverted to the obedient Helen he knew. He was in for a surprise. Not only did I not make him breakfast, I had gotten up even earlier and gone for a walk in DeVargas Park. I hadn't walked alone in years, without a mental checklist of chores waiting for me at home. The food truck vendors were setting up. The group of women doing morning exercises were laughing and chatting as they moved to the music. I sat on a bench under a cottonwood tree and watched life happen around me. Families eating breakfast together, couples holding hands, children running with the pure energy of those who don't yet know the disappointments of the adult world. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel envy. It didn't hurt to see what I didn't have, because I finally understood something fundamental. You can't miss something that never truly existed. My marriage had been an illusion. My perfect family had been a mirage. For 4 decades, I had been chasing the shadow of something that only existed in my imagination. But now I had something real. Freedom. I had a bank account in my name. A morning with no obligations, the sun warming my skin, and the absolute certainty that I deserved more than what I had been getting. When I returned home 2 hours later, I found Arthur waiting for me in the living room, looking grim. "Helen, we need to talk." "We have nothing to talk about, Arthur. unless you want to confess the truth about Jenna and apologize. But I suspect your pride won't allow that. Helen? Don't call me Helen. Call me Mrs. Miller. The informalities between us are over. And I went up to my room, leaving him there, for the first time in his life, unsure of how to regain control over me. The following days were a silent war. Arthur tried all his tactics: emotional manipulation, blackmail, guilt, anger. Every morning he expected to find the submissive Helen of old, and every day he encountered a woman he no longer recognized. He stopped coming home for dinner, probably to show me he could live without me. I used those evenings to read the books I had bought at the downtown bookstore, to watch the shows he disliked, to call my cousin Hope in Florida and chat for hours without anyone telling me I was wasting money on nonsense. On Friday night, he came home drunk. I heard him stumble in the living room, knock something over, and curse. I didn't go down to help him as I would have before. Let him deal with his own drunkenness, just as I had dealt with my own pain alone for so many years. He staggered up to the bedroom and collapsed on the bed without taking off his clothes. Helen? Helen, come here, he mumbled, his voice thick with alcohol. I need to tell you something. What do you need to tell me? That maybe I was wrong. Maybe we can fix this. Fix what, Arthur? This. Us. Our marriage. He sat up with difficulty and tried to focus his eyes on me. I can end it. With that thing. That nonsense. We can start over. That thing? That nonsense? Arthur, that thing is your 2-year relationship with another woman. That nonsense is your plan to steal my house. I wasn't going to steal anything. We just needed the money for a business deal. I was going to give you your share later. Lies. Even drunk, he was still lying. And the condo in Key West? Was that part of the business deal too? He fell silent. Even in his intoxicated state, he knew he had no excuse for that. Look, Helen, I know I messed up, but we can fix it. You have to go back to being the way you were. The way I was when? Like the idiot who didn't notice anything? Like the unpaid maid? Like the invisible woman who only existed for your convenience? Don't say that. You're important to me. If I were important to you, you wouldn't have betrayed me for 2 years. If I were important to you, you wouldn't have forged my signature. If I were important to you, you would have included me in the decisions of our life. He lay back down and closed his eyes. You're too worked up. We'll talk tomorrow when you're calmer. Calmer. As if my dignity were a case of hysterics that time would cure. On Saturday morning, Arthur woke up with a massive hangover and a blurry memory of our late-night conversation. He went down to the kitchen expecting to find breakfast and remedies for his headache. Instead, he found me dressed in my Sunday best, my purse in hand, ready to leave. Where are you going so early? I'm going to church, and then to lunch with Mrs. Carmen, my neighbor. I no longer have to explain my activities to you. Are you coming back to make lunch? I'm not making lunch. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever again. If you're hungry, call Jenna. Maybe she'll cook for you. His face turned red with rage. Helen, that's enough of this nonsense. If you want me to end it with her, I will. But you have to stop this tantrum. Tantrum. My awakening was a tantrum. I don't want you to end it with her, Arthur. In fact, I hope you'll be very happy together. But you'll have to be happy without my house and without my money. Your money? Helen, everything we have, we built together. Together? Arthur, you built your career while I built your comfort. You saved in secret accounts while I was left without a penny of my own for 40 years. There is nothing together about this relationship. I walked out of the house, feeling for the first time in decades that I was in control of my own destiny. At the 11 o'clock Mass, at the same St. Joseph's Church where I had gotten married so many years ago, I didn't pray for my marriage as I always had. Instead, I thanked God for giving me the strength to wake up. Mrs. Carmen, my lifelong neighbor, welcomed me with chicken soup and infinite patience to listen to my whole story. At the end, when I finished telling her everything, she was quiet for a moment. Helen, honey, I always suspected something wasn't right. Arthur was going out a lot, coming home some nights looking too happy, like he'd been celebrating. But I never dared to say anything. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want to be the one to break your heart. and because I knew you wouldn't believe me until you were ready to see the truth. She was right. A week ago, I would have found an excuse for anything anyone told me about Arthur. So what are you going to do now, honey? I'm going to divorce him, and I'm going to get my house back. Mrs. Carmen smiled. Atta girl, Helen. You've finally woken up. I returned home at dusk. Arthur was in the living room watching television with a beer, as if it were a normal day. But when he saw me walk in, his expression changed. Helen, we need to talk. Seriously. Yes, you're right. We do. I sat across from him, but not in my usual spot in the corner of the sofa, where I had always made myself small so as not to bother him. I sat in the armchair facing him, looking him straight in the eye. I've made a decision, Arthur. I'm going to divorce you. Divorce me? Helen, you can't get a divorce. We've been together for 40 years. Exactly. 40 years where you had a wife and I had a boss. It's over. He shot up from the sofa, agitated. Helen, you're crazy. Getting divorced at 64? What are you going to do? How are you going to live? You don't even know how to manage your own affairs. I'll learn. I've already opened my own bank account. I've already found a lawyer. I've already started living without depending on you, and guess what? I haven't died. A lawyer? You've already seen a lawyer? Yes. Mr. Morales, downtown. Very good, very sharp. He's already reviewed all the documents I brought him. Arthur's face went pale. What documents? The photos of your mistress, the messages from your phone, the forged house papers, the statements from your secret accounts. Helen, you can't. That's an invasion of privacy. Invasion of privacy? Arthur, I'm your wife, or I was your wife. I have a right to know what you were doing with our money and our property. He sat down again, this time without his usual arrogant confidence. What did the lawyer say? He said I have a solid case. That the house is mine because I inherited it before the marriage. That forging my signature is a felony. That hiding assets during a marriage is also illegal. Helen, please. Think about this. If we get divorced, you'll be left alone. No family, no money, nothing. Arthur, I'm already alone. I've been alone for years while you built your secret life with another woman. The difference is that now I'll be alone with dignity. And the kids? What will David and Patricia say? The kids are adults. They already made their choice when they told me I was crazy and that your affair was my fault. Now they have to live with the consequences of choosing a liar over their mother. Arthur was quiet for a few minutes. Then, in a voice I had never heard from him, he asked, Is there anything I can do to change your mind? I looked him in the eyes, this man with whom I had shared my entire life, who had been my first love, the father of my children, my partner for 4 decades, and I felt nothing. Not love, not hate, not nostalgia, just an immense peace. No, Arthur, there's nothing you can do, because the damage isn't what you did now. The damage is in the 40 years you made me feel like I wasn't enough, that I didn't deserve respect, that my only value was in what I could do for you. Helen, I'm not finished. The damage is that when I discovered your betrayal, your first instinct was to make me believe I was crazy. The damage is that you would rather destroy me than admit you were wrong. I stood up from the chair. I'm filing for divorce on Monday. You have the right to get your own lawyer. And you have the right to take your clothes and your personal belongings. Everything else stays here in my house. Helen, please. Good night, Arthur. Sleep well. For the first time in 40 years, I know I will. On Monday morning, when Arthur got up to go to work, I was already gone. I had risen before dawn and walked through the empty streets of Santa Fe, watching the city slowly come to life. The bakers were opening their shops, filling the air with the scent of freshly baked pastries. The street sweepers were finishing their night shifts, and the first trucks were starting to roll down Paseo de Peralta, carrying workers to their jobs. For the first time in 4 decades, I didn't have to make anyone's breakfast. I didn't have to press anyone's shirt. I didn't have to be functional for anyone but myself. It was such a strange sensation it almost made me dizzy, as if I had spent my whole life walking on crutches and suddenly discovered I had my own 2 legs. I walked all the way to the Santa Fe Plaza and sat on a bench under a century-old ash tree. I took the folder I had prepared the night before from my bag, all the divorce papers, the copies of the photographs, the printed bank statements, the evidence of my forged signature. My new life fit into a simple manila folder. At 9 o'clock sharp, I was at Mr. Morales' office. He was a man in his 50s, serious but kind, with the patience of someone who has seen many family tragedies and has learned that each person needs their own time to heal. Mrs. Miller, are you absolutely sure you want to proceed with the filing? Completely sure, Mr. Morales. I only ask because in cases like yours, many couples try to reconcile. At your age, after so many years together, Mr. Morales, with all due respect, my age is precisely why I can't waste any more time on a marriage that was never real. At 64, every day I have left is precious. I'm not going to waste another one living a lie. I signed all the papers with a steady hand. My name, Helen Miller, appeared on every document as the plaintiff. Plaintiff, a word I never imagined would apply to me, but which I now wore like a badge of honor. How long will the process take, Mr. Morales? With the evidence you have, especially the document forgery, I estimate between 6 and 8 months. Your husband will have the right to hire his own lawyer and present a defense, but frankly, Mrs. Miller, your case is very solid. I left the office feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the blind hope that things would get better on their own, but the active hope of someone who is actively building her own solution. My next stop was the Emerald Salon at the Santa Fe Place Mall. It had been 3 years since I'd been to a hair salon. All that time, I had cut my own hair at home, in front of the bathroom mirror with dull scissors, because Arthur said spending money on vanities was irresponsible. "What are we doing today?" asked Yolanda, the stylist, a cheerful woman in her 40s with bright red hair. "I want a complete change. I want to look like the woman I am now, not the woman I was before." Yolanda studied me with a professional eye. "How about we give your hair some movement? A shoulder-length cut with layers, and we can add some highlights to bring your natural color to life." 3 hours later, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. My gray hair now had silver tones that shone under the salon lights. The cut framed my face in a way that made me look years younger. But more than that, it made me look alive. "Do you like it?" Yolanda asked. "I love it. I feel beautiful." "You are beautiful, ma'am. I can tell you're starting a new chapter in your life." How did she know? Was my internal transformation so obvious that even a stranger could see it? From there, I went to Dillard's. I hadn't bought new clothes for myself in years, only an occasional blouse or skirt from a flea market when it was absolutely necessary. I had always considered spending on my appearance to be selfish, that the money could be used for more important things for the house or the family. But now I understood that taking care of myself wasn't vanity. It was self-respect. I tried on dresses, blouses in colors I had never dared to wear, comfortable yet elegant shoes. In the dressing room, seeing my reflection in new clothes with my refreshed hair, I realized I had been dressing like an invisible woman, in drab colors and cuts that hid my figure instead of flattering it. I bought 3 dresses, 2 blouses, a pair of jeans that fit perfectly, and a pair of red shoes that I fell in love with at first sight, but would have never dared to wear when I was Arthur's wife. The sales clerk, a young, enthusiastic woman, told me, "Ma'am, you look radiant. Is this for a special occasion?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation. "It's for the rest of my life." That evening, when Arthur came home, he found me in the living room reading a romance novel I had bought at the local bookstore. I was wearing one of my new dresses, my red shoes, and my hair shone under the lamplight. He stood in the doorway, staring at me as if I were a stranger who had invaded his house. "Helen?" "Hello, Arthur. You look different." "I am different." He approached nervously, as if afraid I might disappear if he moved too quickly. "Helen, I've been thinking about what we talked about yesterday. I've been thinking too, and I already filed for divorce this morning." His face fell. "You already filed? But I thought that was just a threat." "Those weren't threats, Arthur. They were promises." "Helen, please think about it. We can go to couples counseling. Couples counseling?" I looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and pity. "Arthur, therapy is for when 2 people want to save something worth saving. I no longer want to save this marriage because I finally understand it was never a real marriage." "How can you say that? We had children together. We built a life together. You built your life and I made it possible. There's a difference. I got up from the couch and walked to the window overlooking the courtyard. The bougainvilleas I had planted decades ago were still blooming, more beautiful than ever, oblivious to the human drama unfolding inside the house. You know what I realized today, Arthur? I realized I've spent 40 years waiting for you to love me the way I loved you, waiting for you to value me the way I valued you, waiting for you to respect me the way I respected you. I turned to face him, but I'm not waiting anymore. I'm not going to beg for love or respect or consideration. I'm not going to live as if I'm a burden in my own life anymore. Helen, I do love you. No, Arthur. You love the comfort I provided. You love having someone to manage your domestic life while you have your adventures. But that's not love. That's convenience. He sank into his favorite armchair, suddenly looking older, more fragile. So what happens now? Now you're going to have to learn to live alone. You're going to have to make your own breakfast, wash your own clothes, clean your own house. You're going to have to be responsible for your own life, as you should have been all along. I don't know how to do those things, Helen. Then you'll learn. At 65, you still have time to learn new skills. That night, we ate in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. But it was a different silence from the one we had shared for years. It wasn't the complicit silence of two people who have run out of things to say. It was the expectant silence of two lives separating, each preparing to go its own way. After dinner, Arthur went to his study as usual, but this time he didn't lock himself in to plan his secret life with Jenna. This time, I heard him making desperate phone calls, probably looking for a lawyer, probably explaining to his mistress that things had gotten complicated. I went to the bedroom and sat at the vanity. My reflection in the mirror showed me a woman who had finally found her way back to herself. My silver hair shone. My skin had color again. My eyes had regained a spark I thought was lost forever. I opened the drawer where I kept the photographs of Arthur's betrayal. One by one, I tore them into tiny pieces. Not out of rage, but out of liberation. I no longer needed to carry the proof of his infidelity, because I no longer defined myself as the betrayed woman. I defined myself as the woman who had found the strength to say enough. The pieces of the photographs fell into the trash can like confetti at a strange celebration. The celebration of my own rebirth. 8 months later, on the day the judge signed my divorce decree, I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate either. I simply felt a deep peace, like when a long storm ends and the sun breaks through the clouds. I walked out of the courthouse with my papers in hand and strolled through downtown Santa Fe, breathing the air of a legally free woman. The house was awarded entirely to me, as it should have been. Arthur had to return the money he had stolen from the secret accounts and pay damages. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was enough to remodel the kitchen, fix the roof that had been leaking for years, and paint the whole house in the colors I had always loved, but he considered too bright. Now the walls of my living room are a soft yellow that makes the morning light dance in every corner. The kitchen has new blue and white Mexican tiles, and a small dining nook perfect for one person who has finally learned to enjoy her own company. Arthur went to live with Jenna in a rented apartment on the outskirts of town. According to Mrs. Carmen, who hears everything that happens in the neighborhood, the relationship lasted barely 3 months after the divorce. It turns out Jenna was very romantic when it came to the successful married man with his own house, but less enthusiastic about the 66-year-old divorcee who had to start from scratch and also learn how to make his own scrambled eggs. I felt no satisfaction when I heard about their breakup, nor did I feel pity. I simply realized that Arthur no longer occupied any emotional space in my life. He had become an anecdote from the past, like one of those stories you tell at family gatherings. Remember when? But without nostalgia, without pain, without anything more than the quiet distance of time. It took my children 4 months to reach out to me. Patricia was the first. She showed up one Saturday afternoon unannounced, with a somber look on her face and a bouquet of grocery store flowers. "Mom, I came to apologize." I invited her in, served her coffee in the new mugs I'd bought on Canyon Road. Beautiful hand-painted ceramic ones with bird designs. Apologize for what, honey? For not believing you. For making you feel crazy. For not being on your side when you needed me most. She told me that after the divorce, she had spoken with her father. And seeing him living alone, making his own sad-looking meals, his apartment a mess, she had begun to understand all the invisible work I had done for 4 decades. I also found out about Jenna. I found out about everything, Mom. I didn't know Dad was capable of that. Children never want to see their parents' flaws, I said, without reproach. It's normal. I didn't want to see your father's flaws either, until I couldn't ignore them anymore. Patricia stayed with me all day. She helped me plant new flowers in the courtyard, went with me to the farmer's market where I bought spices for a new chili recipe I wanted to try, and for the first time in years, we had a real conversation, woman to woman, not just mother to daughter. Mom, how did you find the courage to be so brave? I wasn't brave, Patty. It was the opposite. I was a coward for 40 years. Brave would have been leaving the first time he disrespected me. David took longer to come around, but when he did, he came with Amanda and my grandkids. The children ran to me yelling, "Grandma!" as if months hadn't passed. With that ability, kids have to live in the present without holding grudges. David looked uncomfortable, but he had matured. His face had the lines that appear when life teaches you lessons you'd rather not learn. Mom, I was wrong. About you, about Dad, about the whole situation. What changed your mind? Seeing him live alone, seeing how he didn't even know where you kept the clean towels, realizing that for 40 years, you were the one who kept our family running. Not him. Amanda, who had once advised me to be more understanding of Arthur, now looked at me with a mixture of respect and shame. Helen, I said horrible things to you when you needed support. I have no excuse. Excuses aren't necessary, honey. Only lessons learned. That afternoon, I played with my grandchildren in the renovated courtyard, made them quesadillas with cheese I'd bought at the market, and listened to them tell me about school, their friends, their dreams of becoming astronauts and veterinarians. For the first time in months, the house was filled with the laughter of children again. But when they left, I didn't feel empty as I used to. I felt whole. I had enjoyed their company without needing to please them, without erasing my own needs to satisfy theirs. Now my days have a new rhythm. I wake up when my body is ready, not when an alarm clock rings to make someone else's breakfast. I drink my coffee watching the sunrise from the kitchen window, reading the entire newspaper if I feel like it, not just the sections Arthur wasn't interested in. 3 times a week, I go to a watercolor painting class at the local community arts center. I never thought I had any talent for art, but it turns out I have a good eye for color and a natural patience for small details. My first painting was of the bougainvilleas in the courtyard, and it now hangs framed in my living room, proudly signed, Helen Miller, 2024. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I go to a French class for seniors at the library. At 65, I'm learning the language I always wanted to master, but never had time to study. My teacher, a young woman who lived in Paris for a year, tells me I have very good pronunciation and that I'm a quick learner. Why are you learning French, Mrs. Miller? Because I've always wanted to, and because now I have time to do the things I've always wanted to do. The weekends are entirely my own. Sometimes I go to the movies by myself, something I had never done before, and now I love. I sit in the middle row, buy a large popcorn without guilt, and watch the romantic comedies that Arthur found to be silly women's stuff. Other times I take a drive to the art galleries on Canyon Road, browse the artisan shops, buy small pieces for my house, and eat at local diners where nobody knows me, and I can just be Helen. Not someone's wife, not someone's mother, just Helen. Last month I did something that would have been unthinkable a year ago. I signed up for a group trip to the Florida Keys to visit my cousin Hope. 5 days in Florida with a group of women my age, exploring the islands, seeing the historic sights, enjoying the ocean. It was the first time in my life I traveled without asking permission, without having to justify the expense, without worrying about who would make dinner while I was away. Standing on a pier in Key West, with the tropical sun on my skin and the wind in my silver hair, I had a picture taken. In it, I'm smiling with a happiness I hadn't felt in decades. It's the smile of a woman who has finally found herself. That photo is now framed on my nightstand, next to another picture taken the day I received my first check for selling my watercolors at a local gallery. It's not a lot of money, but it's mine, earned with a talent I never knew I had. with a passion I could only develop when no one else was demanding all my time. Some nights, when I sit in the new armchair I bought for myself, a single-seater perfect for one person, in a soft, sage-green fabric, I reflect on these months of chosen solitude versus 40 years of imposed loneliness. Because now I understand the difference. During my marriage, I was alone even when accompanied, invisible even when seen every day, silenced even though I had a voice. Now I am alone by my own choice, visible to myself, with a voice I use to say what I think, what I feel, what I want. Sometimes people ask if I'm not afraid of living alone at my age, if I don't miss having company, if I'm not worried about the future. The truth is, I'm not afraid of anything anymore. After surviving 40 years of a marriage where I wasn't valued, after finding the strength to get divorced when everyone told me I was crazy, after rebuilding my life from scratch at 64, what is there to be afraid of? I've learned that loneliness is only terrible when you don't like yourself. But when you finally become your own best company, solitude transforms into freedom. Now, when I get into my twin bed each night with the Egyptian cotton sheets I bought just because I liked them, when I turn off the lamp after reading a few chapters of a novel I chose, when I listen to the silence of my quiet house, I don't feel emptiness. I feel fulfillment. I feel gratitude. I feel the deep peace of a woman who finally learned that the most important love is the love you have for yourself. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt invisible in your own life, where your voice didn't matter, where your dreams were pushed aside for the needs of others? Tell me about it in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, if you felt that Helen could be you, your mother, your sister, or your friend, give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. Because maybe there's someone else out there who needs to hear that it's never too late to start over, that it's never too late to choose dignity over comfort, that it's never too late to find the way back to yourself.